أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون. As there is only about half an hour available for us today, after that we'll go into question and answer session. I have only taken one verse for commentary today, the second which I read, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً. That is, and those who, when they commit a foul deed or wrong themselves, remember Allah and implore forgiveness for their sins. And who can forgive sins except Allah? And do not knowingly persist in what they do. Here there are two words particularly to be studied in depth, which are al-fahisha and zulm. The Holy Quran reads, those who when commit fahisha or do zulm against their own selves, do this and that. So what does fahisha and zulm really mean? Ordinary translation has been read, but we have to go into further detail and depth into the true meaning and the whole interrelationship question between fahisha and zulm. Fahisha has been described by both Arab dictionaries and the books of commentaries as something which is a crime which is heinous, which is too bad, which is too obvious, which also is publicly condemned not only on religious basis but on the basis of human values as such, etc. But my study of the Holy Quran and how it is used in the Holy Quran reveals a different not entirely different meaning, but reveals some new connotations of the word al-fahisha, which broaden its application and which make it clearly distinct from some other forms of crimes. According to my study and exploration of the verses where it has been used by the Holy Quran, it is mainly and essentially related to sensual pleasures. The word fahsha, as against other sins, is the type of sin which is invariably related to sensual pleasures, natural urges, etc. Although everything ultimately breaks down to pleasures which are sensual, of course, but there are some crimes or sins which naturally emanate from the sensual desires which are left uncontrolled. So if they are permitted to be exaggerated and take their own natural course without an attempt to stem them, then they turn out to be fahisha. So any relationship between man and woman and not only direct intercourse between man and woman, but also all such indecent behaviors which are related to this central theme of male-female relationship would be considered fawahish. But they could not be considered fawahish in certain situations where they are permitted by God. But as against such crimes which can be described as fawahish, there are certain crimes which do not grow out of natural urge as such, but for which you have to first go through a course of regular perversion in your concepts, your tastes, etc. You have to be a sadist, for instance, to commit certain types of crimes, and to be sadist is not natural. Similarly, if a Muslim, for instance, drinks wine, you can say, give some justification of relating it to sensual desires, because he sees people drinking in revelries in such fashion as it creates some desire. But when a Muslim eats flesh of pig, pork or bacon, whatever you call it, for that there is no initial justification at all whatsoever, because he has to overpower an inbred loathsomeness against the flesh of swine, and which has grown with long history of Muslims generally condemning this animal as filthy, bad, and this and that. So the psychological atmosphere created against eating the flesh of pig is such that one has to overpower this, to go beyond certain limits, to bring himself up to eating pork or any other type of flesh of pig. The same would apply to the Hindus, who find naturally uninclined towards eating beef. Sometimes they find it loathsome. Even after they become Muslims, I have found people who vomit when they know that they have eaten beef, or even at the smell of beef being cooked in their homes. So one of such converts, some Hindu Muslim, who was late, his name was Tahir, what was it? Tahir Patel, yes. After the marriage, he came to me, married with a Muslim girl, and said the only problem which we can fail to resolve is the question of eating beef. And to begin with, the problem was eating any meat at all. But gradually, he reconciled with other types of meats, but to eat beef was something beyond him. And he said, when I see it cooked anywhere, I feel like vomiting. So these are the crimes of such nature which have no natural urge, but urges develop after change in tastes, after acquiring certain attitudes, after permitting yourself to go beyond the limits of what is prescribed by God or what is prohibited by God, and gradually adopting a sinful attitude towards law. Such crimes are related with baghi. Inna Allaha yamurukum bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i dhil qurba wa yanha anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi. So all three types of crimes have been comprehensively mentioned in this verse, in the second part of it. Al-Fasha would be such crimes as are related to natural, genuine, sensual urges. One likes to cast a glance at whatever is beautiful, but that glance could become ultimately sinful. In itself, it's not a sin. To desire to increase one's relationship with other sex is natural, but uncontrolled it would become a sin. But munkar is something different. Munkar is misbehavior in public of a type against which the human psyche revolts. And it's not a question of religious taboos or otherwise. Anybody misbehaving in public in a manner as the general public considers it to be bad is called al-munkar. And it has no religion, no religious background. But baghi is the crime of rebellion, be it against the state, man-made laws, or be it against religion. And baghi can, of course, mix with fasha to a degree. They both can join hands and become merged with each other. But baghi as such alone could be found in many areas of human activities of crime which are not related with fasha, which are not related with sensual pleasures by themselves. The second part of my study has revealed that fasha is, as described in the Holy Quran, is described as a contagious disease, as against such crimes which are not contagious in nature. So, when found in society with a free play in public, they always multiply and they grow desire among others to follow suit. But there are certain crimes which have the opposite to this in their nature. Murder, cruelty as such, cannot be contagious because a revulsion is born out of naturally among those who watch murder committed or cruelty to animal or human beings, whatever you call it. It has a deep association with human revulsion. So all crimes of baghi are of such nature. And munkar is halfway between a sort of no man's land. Children sometimes are enamored by al-munkar as well. That is why it's very important for the Muslims to permit children only to see such films created particularly for children, which do not portray irresponsible child behavior in a manner as to allure other children to do so. The adult attitude would be different in such areas of munkar, and children's attitude would be different. When you see a mischievous child anywhere, it being munkar, it may cause a genuine revulsion to that in adult hearts. But sometimes children make heroes out of such bully children. And they think that bullyism is wonderful. And to create mischief attracts the eye and attention of other people. So their tastes and mental commands are not developed and mature enough to decide what is good and what is bad. So the munkar becomes confused and obscure as far as they are concerned. Similarly, the word munkar becomes obscure and confused for such adults who have a long history of living with crime or living in such areas, such slums, etc., where crime is on the rampant so much that they have lost much of their taste for goodness, and their assessment of what is wrong and what is bad is damaged to a degree. So what may appear to be munkar to some others, may not appear to be as munkar to them. So instead of hero worship, villain worship is born out of this lack of proper assessment. So they don't follow villains knowing them to be villains. In fact, ultimately it breaks down to hero worship. But they consider that to be not acts of villainy. They consider such acts as acts of heroism, grandeur, something which brings distinction to them in the society. So matters of tastes differ. And according to the tastes also, the verdict on what is munkar and what is not munkar begins to vary. So that is why I call it the area of no man's land. And it is here exactly where the Holy Quran has put it. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. So fasha may be sometimes a crime of a very grave nature, but because it has some justification somehow, it is placed in the beginning. And as you read the list, it is in the rising order of version. So then comes the area of no man's land, that is al-munkar, and then comes baghi, which is defiance, rebellion against God. Even challenging God's authority. All right, do whatever you may please. So Fir'auniyat is born out of baghi. But petty crimes are born out of fasha, which may develop later on into serious crimes as well. Similarly, fasha has a tendency to expose itself. But to begin with, it has a tendency to cover itself. In munkar, generally there is in fact, there is hardly any case of munkar which one conceals. Munkar means something which one exposes. Misbehavior in public. But baghi is just open defiance of public order and what you think of it. So baghi is only suppressed to escape the arm of law. It is hidden and concealed only to escape punishment in some areas. In some other areas, when it becomes open rebellion, of course it is open. But fasha always begins with something which develops and flourishes unnoticed by outside eyes. To begin with, it is hidden and concealed. It begins as a personal crime of intentions, of thoughts, of desires born out of lust, etc. And to begin with, one does not want to share it with other human beings. So as one gets used to it, then it begins to surface and comes out in the open. When it comes out in the open, then it becomes the fasha, which is most often mentioned in the Holy Quran. But the Holy Quran is the word of God, so Allah has also mentioned the hidden nature of fasha, how it develops, and particularly reminds us that fasha is not only that which is commonly understood to be a public display of evil behavior. This fasha is also concealed within you, and you must take notice of that which is concealed. For instance, let me read some of the verses relating to this issue. The Holy Quran says, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. Don't even go near the fawahish, these sensual crimes or sins, whether they are open and public or whether they are concealed. Concealed fahsha means those desires which are suppressed, desires for doing evil things which one privately nourishes but which find no outcome in public. But it also means such crimes which are committed, not just hidden desires, but committed privately, without the public eye taking note of them, without their being exposed to the public. So this is how fahsha develops. It takes root in the heart by beginning as a malintention, then or a desire born which is given a free hand. So in this context, it would not be a suppressed desire at all. It will be a desire which is encouraged and which is not discouraged and attempted to be rooted out. So relating to the verse we discussed yesterday, we turn back to the question of suppression of desire. If trimming your desires and bringing them under control is suppression, and if it is bad for human psyche, then the alternative would be to let your desires completely go unchecked and flourish as they grow and play havoc with the peace of the society and become ultimately the dominant forces of the society which enslave in the entire human orientations. Then the man begin to live not for higher purposes, but just to live, to satiate his desires whatever way he can. So they ultimately become the object of life. So desires must be controlled and trimmed and brought under some discipline. But fahsha have a tendency to outgrow this discipline. So the first phase begins with hidden private crimes. Then comes the public show of the crimes, indecency in public, and even display with pride of what in older societies is considered to be bad taste. I remember when in 1955 we came to England as a group with Hazrat Muslim Maud to see man and woman in public expressing love to each other by touching and this and that appeared to be so odd to us, so unnatural and so unreal that everybody talked about, look, what sort of society this is. In television and radio in those days, the public discussion of sensual behavior and promiscuity was a rare case. And whenever such things were discussed in public or displayed even in films, they were done with certain precautions. Certain limits were observed. But after many years when I came again here, things had been completely changed and transformed. So this is what fahsha does to the society. It goes on growing, and ultimately it like wild growth misappropriating a farmer's field and pushing out the crop which has a genuine right to be grown there, and ultimately capturing the entire field of the farmer and play havoc with whatever he went to sow with the field with the crop which had right to be there. So that is ultimately, we know as farmers, ultimately very little is reaped out of such fields, which are not particularly and constantly guarded against the growth of these parasites which come from outside. So pleasure there is, even without fasha. Pleasure is not a crime, but genuine lawful pleasure is good for the society, and it must be preserved and maintained and kept in a healthy state. All the forms of pleasure which have some negative connotations, which along with pleasure also have some misery to go along for the society in general, etc., which are not permitted. That is called fasha. And this is contagious. So we must remain guard against exposure of sin in a manner that it encourages others to commit the same sin. Now this leads us into a very important question of hypocrisy versus hiding one's sins and follies. Some people think that it is hypocrisy to commit evil privately and hide it from the public eye. So the societies which permit this to flourish in public and openly, they are more honest societies, they are true, and there is no hypocrisy about them. It is not so. The fact is that hypocrisy has something more to it than just hiding one's fault. To hide one's fault is natural to man. It's everywhere. No society is clean of this tendency, if it is a bad tendency. To hide one's defects, to cover them with makeups. In cases of women, you find that there is hardly a woman today in the modern world which can live without a makeup. What is that? Of course, it is hiding some defects, natural defects, and highlighting some beauties which are not there. So some sort of hypocrisy is bred into us, if it is hypocrisy at all. So no society is true in the sense that all its bad points are exposed and all its goodness is suppressed or hidden. So what is hypocrisy then? Hypocrisy, in fact, means to displace, to present yourself with intention to deceive others about your piety or about your true status. So this becomes, to begin with, there is a no man's area which we have to enter. Beyond that lies hypocrisy, pure and simple and defined. So in the no man's areas, there are many minute things against which we stand guard. The Holy Quran says, "Lima taquluna ma la tafalun, kabura maqtan indallahi an taqulu ma la tafalun." Why do you say such things which you do not do? Now, it doesn't say, why do you not expose your crimes, yourself, to the society? They are two different things. And this will draw the demarcation line between hypocrisy and natural urge to hide one's defects. On the one hand, the Holy Quran says this, "Kabura maqtan indallahi an taqulu ma la tafalun." It is one of the prime crimes, the foremost crimes, to say what you do not do. On the other hand, we hear Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as condemning those who expose their own crimes and come out in public. There are reported events when some person had committed a crime, came forward in public, in presence of others to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and confessed his crime to him. And Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, instead of paying attention, turned his face to the other direction as if he had not heard anything. Until he was left with no choice when the man repeated his confession so many times that he could not be publicly ignored. Then he turned to him and prescribed the punishment. So, this is a different area altogether. What is the difference? The fact is that some people hide their crimes because they find themselves helpless in fighting against the crime. In private, they are also ashamed, and they know they have committed a folly. If they hide their crime, it is out of natural shame against the crime. But there are others who have no private shame against the crimes they commit. And yet in public they want to show that they condemn such things and they're bad and they are above such follies and so on. This is a criminal act. So one difference must be noted, is this. And the second, why it is discouraged, is the reason because it becomes fasha. When you publicly display what you have been doing in private, it is not just a bravery to admit what you have committed, and it is act of your being consistent in your claims and in your conduct. It's not so. Many a time, to enjoy crime in private is much less enjoyable than to enjoy it in public. So, to commit crime in public is not just a bravery of confession. It relates to the area where gradually you're tired of taboos and restrictions, and you feel there is always something marring our pleasure by hiding it from public. Come on, let's go into the open. Defy the society and tell them, look, whatever you consider of us, we don't care a hoot for that. Go ahead and do whatever you think. We are going to enjoy ourselves, no inhibitions. So the basic force which urges such crimes to spring out into the open is not good, is not truth, is selfishness of a type. So it is not a praiseworthy act. It is condemnable, doubly so, because this encourages crime in the society and promotes it. This is why, in such societies where they condemn smoking, they are taking greater measures to inhibit smoking in public. The underlying principle is not hypocrisy. The underlying principle is not hypocrisy. It is the same principle of fasha as understood in the sense of a contagious disease. They say if somebody smokes, let him do it in private. Should not endanger the public by creating an impression that such an enjoyable thing is so wonderful to do so, and so on. So the innocent children also are gradually caught up in the snare, and they think, why not enjoy this? That is why in Qadian there was a time when Hazrat Muslim Maud prohibited smoking in public. Now, was he promoting hypocrisy? Certainly not. That was the underlying principle. He could not prohibit smoking as such, because Hazrat Masih Maud once asked about smoking, gave his edict that, look here, what my holy master Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has not prohibited, who am I to prohibit it? So, from religious point of view, as far as the religious edict goes, smoking is not a crime. But eating poison is not a crime either. Eating poison to a degree where it hurts you but does not kill you. If you eat it with the intention of committing suicide, then of course it's a crime. But eating unhealthy food or indulging in such things as injure your health and well-being are not crimes. So such things belong to that area. But eating bad food is not contagious, because there is a natural aversion to this. So it doesn't even fall under that category as smoking. That is why Hazrat Muslim Maud, because as God had promised, he was very acutely wise and astute. He drew this line where it should have been drawn. He said, all right, don't pollute the society. A poison, of course, but if you must live with it, do it privately. No harm as far as we are concerned. But if you make it a public offense, so that the children are promoted, are encouraged to do so, then we'll punish you to a degree, not in the sense of a state punishing a culprit, but social pressures were brought to bear upon such people. So that is as far as fasha is concerned. So sin, I have already explained. Now zulm, the question of zulm. I beg to disagree with all the commentators who, perhaps because of the order of the words, has considered fasha to be a bigger crime than zulm. And I'm surprised to find that most of them have committed the same mistake. They say, إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. They say it means when they commit a big crime like fasha, or even they commit a smaller crime like zulm. While zulm is declared to be the biggest crime by the Holy Quran itself, in the shirk ala zulmun azim. Let me read from the verses. I wonder what is I have somewhere. Yes. The verses have not been. Huh? All right. No, that I have already quoted in the Shirk al-Zulmul Azim. But there are other verses dealing with the question of zulm in the Holy Quran. If you take them in totality, then it appears that zulm is a sin, is a word to denote sin of the widest application. So the zulm can cover fasha as well as baghi as well as munkar. Basically, the meaning of zulm itself has to be understood. It is derived from darkness. So any cover which happens to fall between God and man creates zulm. In whatever area that cover falls will decide the intensity and the enormity of the crime. You see, the cover between man and God is not something which completely separates a man from God in all his areas of activities and relationships. Such covers fall piecemeal. And that is why there is a danger of your increasingly becoming sinful if you do not if you do not take caution after the first experience of sin, and do not make effort to remove that first thin veil of cover between you and God, then what happens is, in another area another veil falls, in another veil falls, so that they increase in number and also they increase in thickness until one is totally lost. So ash-shirka zulmun azim. Why ash-shirk is zulmun azim? Because in shirk one has not only severed ties with God in almost all areas of his activities, but has replaced his ties with God with his ties with imaginary gods or human gods. So there is no possibility left at all of his coming back to God, because he has found other gods to replace God, replace the God, the only God. So that is why ash-shirk is described as zulmun azim. The greatest possible darkness is when you do not only sever ties with the source of light, the real source of light, but you satisfy your own desires to live in light by falsely creating lights which are not lights, which are only forms of darknesses. So zulm is to be understood with this fundamental meaning of darkness. Darkness can be shadowy darkness, darkness can be complete and total, and so on and so forth. So the word zulm covers all sorts of sins, fasha, al-munkar and al-bagh all together. So the Holy Quran says, إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ, which means when they commit crimes related to sensual pleasures. Why the Holy Quran has mentioned this before the word zulm? While it's a milder crime as compared to the zulm, or at least applicable in less areas of human activities than sin is, than zulm is. The obvious reason is that here good people are mentioned, not bad people. Because as you read on, you will see, Zakarullah wa fastaghfiru. So those people who are basically good, who are by nature inclined towards Allah and towards seeking His forgiveness, they are more endangered by sensual crimes than crimes of other natures. Because sensual crimes have some justifications anyhow. They are unlikely to commit other crimes of baghya, etc. So awe reduces the chances of their encountering other crimes. So that is why fasha is first, not because it speaks of bigger crimes, but because there is more likelihood of even good people making a misstep here and there in the areas of sensual crimes. But zulm is further away from them. But sometimes, when they permit themselves to commit a smaller crime, they advance and do also commit sometimes the bigger crimes. So fasha can lead to zulm of graver orders. This also is the direction of the verse, that if good people commit fasha, this is also a form of parda or veil between God and man. because Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has described it as such, but as a temporary veil, not a permanent veil. Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam at many a time considered speaking of different crimes like committing fornication, even that, said for the period he commits this, he is not a believer. That means a veil has fallen between him and God for that period, but it could be lifted. And in other hadith, referring to the same verse, Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that if a believer has committed a crime or even a heinous nature, a sensual crime is being mentioned there, then if he seeks forgiveness of Allah, if he repents, if he says prayers and seeks forgiveness and remembers Allah, then he is likely to be forgiven and washed clean of the sin as if he had never committed it. So in this order, when you read Zalamu anfusahum zakarullah, zakarullah is before istighfar. That shows their love of God. These are the people who basically, rudimentary, in their roots, love God. Love of God is rooted deep into them. So immediately after the pleasure of crime is over, they return to the barrenness of the outcome of such pleasures. They suddenly turn to God, oh God, what we have done. So they are more afraid of punishment for the crime than displeasure they have incurred from Allah. So Zakarullah here means means their desire to remain on the right side of Allah, to be in His sight as His people. So a slight digression in any direction brings them back with a reaction to the right path again, and they say, oh, we have done something to displease Allah. Please Allah, don't show displeasure to us. وَاسْتَغْفِرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِمْ. And then they turn to seeking forgiveness from Allah for all their crimes, not one crime. Because here the first fahisha is mentioned as single act of crime. Zalamu also indicates some act of dhulm. But when they turn to Allah with istighfar, they turn not only to seek istighfar or forgiveness of Allah from that crime committed at that moment, but generally for their dhunub. So this tendency is depictive of a scenario where human man becomes humiliated in his own eyes, in his own sight, and then begins to scan his past. One weakness brings to memory other weaknesses. One crime recalls other crimes he had committed. And thinking in this process, he says, oh my Lord, I am a sinful person after all. I've done that and that and that, so please forgive me everything which I have committed. وَمَنْ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Who else other than God can forgive sins? But وَلَمْ يُسِرُّوا عَلَى مَا فَعَلُوا وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ. But after knowing the full consequences of crimes, after having committed them, experienced them, after knowing the pleasure as well as the aftermath of the crime, which is uneasiness and dissatisfaction with oneself, lowering of one's own status in one's own eyes, etc., they gradually get fed up, and by naturally they become disinclined. So, lam yusirru ala ma falu. They don't seek forgiveness, at the same time are determined to commit a crime again. They don't go together. if knowing what crime is, they insist on committing it again and again, they are not the people who would deserve forgiveness from Allah. So here also there is a very fine line of demarcation between two attitudes related to this situation. Elsewhere you read in prayers of the holy people that we committed crimes again and again and again. And you showed such magnanimity as to forgive us again and again and again. So if this is wrong, if it is not possible, because God says, if you insist on committing crimes, then I will not forgive you. How can they say that? So that situation is different from this one. That situation is a situation where after committing a crime, someone is truly repentant, at least at that time. And he decides to do away with crime once and for all in future. Having got a clean slate as far as his intentions go, then sometimes he confronts the same enticements and allurements and falls prey to them, while previously his intentions were good indeed. So these are not the people discussed here in this verse. They are exempt. They are discussed elsewhere in hadith, where you find that God is sometimes mentioned to be sometimes so merciful to some people whose willingness, whose will to abstain from crime is weak, yet desire is strong. That Allah turns to them with mercy again and again and again.